Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Daud Waid from Golden Sparrow, and we are doing the third part of chapter number 21 of a science book, module 5, cells and tissues. Last two sessions, we spoke about what are cells. And today we'll come to a very interesting part. It may be the longest part of this particular chapter, but this essentially is a lot of new words that you'll come across. What are tissues? Well, if you got a bad cough, this is what a tissue box looks like, right? Well, if you write this answer, trust me, you'll get zero in NIS exams or any exam for that matter. But what actually are tissues? So easy to understand. We learn about cells. Get a group of cells, and that's what a tissue is. You can rub your nose. Well, that's also a group of cells in one way. It's a unit. A group of cells that function have, primarily same function, same, almost similar shape, size, and have a common origin is what tissue is all about. That's all. It's perhaps the easiest 2 marks you can understand. A group of cell is called tissue, right? Remember the word cell itself came from the experiment of Robert Hooke when he was looking at the Koch cell and it looked like some monks who live in a cell. Very interesting origin of these words, but essentially you need to know your biology concepts very well. This chapter, as I told you, will have lots and lots of new words as you go about. So now we've got two different type of tissues. Plant tissue, and yes, even without writing, it's the animal tissue. Now, tissues in plant are something that will divide throughout their life. They'll keep on growing, they'll keep on regenerating, and they'll keep on dividing themselves. Plant tissues are essentially two very important classifications. One is the meristematic tissue, and the other one is permanent tissue. Meristematic tissue are usually those tissues that grow at the tip of the root, the stem, the branches. What is the origin of meristematic tissue? Well, they are small, correct? They have large nucleus and they are thinly walled. So meristematic tissues, why should they be thinly walled? Because they're growing, right? The other shroud should, other plant should emerge from it. So wherever they grow, they will be, the apexis of the root or the shoot, which is where meristematic tissue is. Look at this. So if I quickly go through this meristematic tissue here, this is right at we call it the bud, the nip, right? And then as the root. So they're growing. This is lateral meristematic tissue. So they're growing up, correct? Intercalary, which means that they will keep branching out. That's a node of a tissue. You only have to understand where the tissue's origin are, and it becomes fairly easy for you to understand the nature of the tissue. Then the other type of tissue are the permanent tissue of plants. Now, this is very interesting. Well, they are made up of cells which have lost the ability to multiply. Now, permanent tissues are three types. The easier answer is protective, supportive, and conductive. Right? So now plants need something to protect themselves. So that's protective tissue. Then they also need a system to, support it. That's supportive tissue. And we'll talk about it. And then there's a conductive tissue, like your blood in your veins, the water, the nutrients has to flow, which is a conductive tissue. Let's start with an easier answer of conductive. The word you might use for conductive is vascular tissue, right? So what is happening is in a conductive tissue, also called the vascular tissue, you are essentially growing into the fluid up and down movement. So there are two types of vasculars, xylem and phloem. Xylem is more towards the center of the stem. It allows water and mineral to be absorbed from the soil upward. So here you see that's where the xylem is. So if you have a tissue going up, so the xylem is going up and the water is nutrients is supplied up all along these branches. And phloem is to conduct the food, that is the synthesized sugar in the leaves to flow downward and upward. So now let's say one xylem is for all the water and phloem is all for the leaves to all the sugar is distributed across. So simple conductive tissue. What do you mean by supportive tissue? Very easy to understand. It supports. So different part of the plants are supported. So this tissue fills up the interiors of the potatoes, perhaps, yeah, which store food. So supportive is storing food, which also could be a word for ground tissues. Then you have a tissue which is at the end of it protective. Plant need protection. The leaves, are thick walls around it. Stems have thick walls. Roots have thick walls. These are all, a simple word will be dermal tissues or protective tissues. I'll quickly go back two type of plant tissues, meristematic and protected and permanent. And meristematic, you understood two types again. So we looked at simple, where they grow, and permanent tissues are protective, supportive, and conductive. The easier thing would be to understand these tissues, simple terms as we go ahead. Now we might go to a little more detailed one about the animal tissues. The animal tissues are again grouped into four categories. What are tissues? You can see all cells bundled together having same performance is basically tissue. So the types of animal tissue are four. Again, we've got, connective tissues. So essentially anything that connects in our body. Muscular tissues, right? You can see all the muscles there. The heart is a muscle, cardiac muscle. We'll talk about this. There is skeletal muscle as we go about it. And then there is, smooth muscle, and we'll talk about what they also are. An important new word, perhaps, as a new learn is epithelial tissue. Epithelial is basically, again, a group of tissues which are very thin. So they actually grow on the lining of the organs, the internal organs of the body. So we will look about the epithelial issues. And finally, it's a very, very famous tissue, nerve tissues. All your reactions. As we say, the difference between us and perhaps a snake is react or respond. This is a nervous tissues that tells you how to do it. Let's a little detail about what epithelial tissue is. So internal or internal, it's a tightly packed cell, right? But a very thin membrane, non-vascular. That means there's no movement of fluid on it, and on the basement membrane. Very interestingly, epithelial tissues are named after the shapes they come in. So, the first name could be a simple word like simple, stratified. Second name is based on what shape it is. So is it a cube shape, square shape, or column shape? And you can see that. So there could be square shaped tissue. So it is squamous. Squamous epithelial. Now, these are hexagonals. If you look at them, they are hexagonal in the nature, right? So you see more like a beehive, and they are on the outer part of the skin. So if you look at these tissues, they form the outer part of the skin as we look into it. Let me, just easy for you to understand if I can draw these for you. Then we've got, then quickly get into it. Okay, now we've got cuboid, which is basically again a thick, now cuboids are thick, and some part of kidney is cuboid. So we are looking at a kidney shape out here in the cuboid part of the tissue. So I think I'll just quickly check my pen, but as long as you can understand and we can work it out, good enough. Then finally, it's the column. So the column ones are tall cells, stomach, intestine. Look at things that are long, stretchable. That's columnar cells help in secretion and absorption. So most of them are helpful in secretion. That's what epithelial tissues are all about. I know. So look at the epithelial tissues. Almost every organ of the body is some kind of, it's cuboid, or, it's got columnar, or it could be, squamous. So these are the epithelial tissues that we're talking about. Remember, the words might be new. If you just look at your chapters, if you read it now, along with these presentation and these PowerPoints that you see the pictures in, it will be embedded in your mind. These words are pretty easy to understand. The easiest of the tissue, I believe, is muscular tissue. Well, long, narrow cells, muscle fibers. That's what they do. The more you exercise, all the gym workers out there, you need these tissues. And essentially, you look at this, this is nice muscles that are connected to the bones and the tendons. And we've got three types of muscles, which is very simple. So we've got a skeletal muscle, right? Smooth muscle, and we've got cardiac muscle. So skeletal muscles are perhaps the ones that we talk about, which is the smooth muscle and skeletal muscle can also be called straighted or unstraighted. So what do you mean by straighted, unstraighted? So basically, if you look at the straighted muscle, the smooth muscle, so arms, face, leg, neck, all of these, they call movement and are control of a will. It's our will, you can smile, you can frown as you might be doing right now. These are your straighted, smooth muscle. Unstraighted or skeletal muscles are the movement of the body that are not under a will. So, alimentary canal to push things into our body, food pipe, everything is around skeletal muscle. But then it's all a matter of heart. So cardiac muscles are heart muscles. And again, they contract and relax on their own. You can't control your heartbeat unless you see a very beautiful person out there. right? So heart muscles, you will remember it. If you look at it, the way you contract, and heart is one of the most amazing organ of a body. These are also striped muscles that we talk about. So the involuntary muscles are all there we are talking about, right? Then there are voluntary muscles and they are involuntary control. The heart muscles again involuntary. So these are cardiac muscles are involuntary, smooth muscles are involuntary, skeletal muscles are very voluntary that you talk about. The third type of animal tissue is connective tissue. Basically, they connect, right? So blood is a connective tissue, cartilage is a connective tissue, bone is a connective tissue. And then again, they are all cells that are combined together. It brings different structures, tendons bind bones to a muscle, ligaments, connect bones. They support a framework of the body. Adipose connective tissue helps in storage of fat. It's a keyword, adipose, that we've written here. So you look at the adipose connective tissue. It also is a shock-proof cushion around kidneys. Imagine somebody punches you, your adipose connective tissues are helping you out. Blood, very important connective tissue that we have got. All these cartridges, blood, they all have, one of the key functions is to connect and provide strength. And then also, the fluid blood, it transports gases, chemical substance, protects the body. So many, blood has hemoglobin, white blood cells, the immune system of the body. All of these are the animal tissues we talk about. As I said, this is the longest part of it. You're reading it, it's enough with the presentation that I'm giving you. And the final tissue we talk about is the nervous tissue. We'll talk a lot about the nervous tissue in the chapter that follow. So today, just a little diagram. This is perhaps one of the 6-mark question you get. Please memorize this diagram. It's a simple neuron diagram. It has dendrites, there's a nucleus in the middle, there's axons, there's a node of Ranvier, and the axon terminal. That's all you need to know. The space between one nerve to another is called a synapse. So you learn all of these, and this is the only picture I want to give you of the nervous tissue. As we close, some very interesting trivia. It's a very simple part in your book about what is stem cell terminology. You see, if you want cells to regenerate, there are organs, you want more organs. Let's say, your kidney has to be regenerated. Your pancreas has to be regenerated. Liver has to be regenerated. So there is a process you do under mitosis. Asexual reproduction of the mitosis, zygote is formed, and then there's an embryo. The embryo has an umbilical cord, and you use it. These are cultured cell technology. Stem cell therapy is so important, so vital. It can help you reform the cells from cardiac cells, RBCs, epithelial cells. These are some of the biggest technological advances in the field of medical that stem cells can talk about. It has to replace any kind of damaged cell, to study human development, test new drugs, to provide gene therapy. Imagine the use of stem cell from multiple cancer, baldness, blindness, deafness, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. The boxers have this, right? Missing teeth to wound healing, diabetes to spinal cord injury. Stem cell is so powerful. Why did I add this part? Is sometimes, we ask question, why do we even learn all this? What's the use? Perhaps none of you will end up, doing this, but maybe one of you will get inspired and say, I love biology because stem cell is very powerful. And this would be the purpose of everybody else mentioning, and some of you will benefit from that one medical genius we get around. All the best. Keep studying. Good luck.